Let's talk more about this. Sounds absolutely riveting. Is Dan Mace, then the director who joins us for this one on Inside South Africa's Taxi Mafia. Dan, thank you so much for the time. Look, we won't oblige to the fact that you only used Masichaba's visuals there and not mine, Masakekana, should I say, and not my own there as well. So we'll forgive you for that. But this is a difficult story to have put forward. What made you realize and think that this is what we needed to highlight?
Yeah, just like I say in the film, as a South African, because I've been living abroad, and it kind of gives you perspective each time I come back. And we've been brought up as like a normal driver on the roads to fear taxi drivers, and I kind of wanted to find out why there's like this massive rush. Obviously, my first thought was based upon the fact that taxis need to get from point A to point B, and the more trips that they make, the more money that they make.
Yeah.
But I knew that there was probably something deeper to that story. So I just started investigating it, and it was going to be a much smaller video. And the more I got into it, the more we uncovered, and it just seemed like a never-ending loop. And remember, like, this is only the Western Cape.
Yeah.
Speaking specifically to the Western Cape, which employs only 12% of the country's employees. It's a crazy amount, and I can imagine Johannesburg to be just a story that's like double what we just made here.
Yeah. Look, there must have been great fear as well, though, because you're about to basically speak to somebody or speak to people who, like you said in that intro that we just played, have guns, could have any kind of weaponry, don't necessarily want to be interrogated on their ways, means, and how it is that they make money. And your life is ultimately at risk, and people could begin to follow you and say, why is it that you want to know so much? What is it that you're trying to take away from their livelihood? How much of that fear factor was something you had to put aside every single moment, considering that you also then got arrested?
Yeah, so just with the arrest side of things, I teased that in there for the second video because we are making a follow-up. So a lot of people have gone like, you didn't even get arrested. It's just like clickbait stuff. But it was more of just a bait for the next one. And then, yeah, regarding the fearful side of things, in the beginning, I was really scared. That's why we stopped the video halfway through. And I totally understand the kind of ambivalence of the taxi bosses when I went into Nyanga, because the taxi drivers just get painted out as one thing, which is negative. I don't think that there's ever been a story that has highlighted both sides. And that was the goal here, was to just let both sides speak and both sides. And, it kind of, even the film, when it concludes with Mandla's last interview, it still feels as if one side is saying one thing and one side is saying another thing. And then I kind of gave my kind of, I guess it's not a solution, but it's just from my takeaways from the experience. And that it's these kind of gripping stories that really hook me in, and I almost disconnect from the fact that it's probably pretty dangerous.
Yeah. What is it that you then got to learn out of this? I mean, what has this experience given you in terms of understanding South Africa's taxi industry, particularly, of course, yes, in the Western Cape, but still, just like the overarching themes and views that you got here?
Sure. So there's different tiers to the taxi industry. And firstly, I'd like to say the film's titled Taxi Mafia, obviously, because that's for SEO purposes, and the way that the taxi industry has been painted out is obviously the best title to title it. But I would have liked to call it taxi owners, taxi bosses, because a lot of these taxi drivers and taxi owners and the associations attached to the owners and the routes, they are running what you could put in as legitimate businesses, even though it is unregulated. And then there are mobsters and there are criminals. And obviously I don't know about all the other industries, but I can imagine it to be the same in other industries, just in different ways. So yeah, firstly, with the taxi drivers themselves, a lot of these guys, they come from an impoverished background. They haven't had the ability to um, generate an amount of income, and on a good month they're pulling in around 4,000 to 5,000 rand, and so they've got to get from point A to point B, from point B to point C, and there's a lot of pressure that's been put on them from the commuters in the taxis. So a lot of the time they feel as if and I'm not in any way defending the bad driving behavior, but it goes a lot deeper than I've become friends with quite a few of the taxi drivers, and like speaking to them, and a good friend of mine now, Simon Kelo, who I was in the taxi with counting the money. Like he says they don't wake up in the morning and just want to go and drive like crazy on the road. That's not the intention. However, to get the workers to work on time because of the congestion, he, from his mouth, has said that this is the only way to do it, or else you'd get shouted at in the taxi, and there won't be people getting to work on time. And obviously with the buses, if the government regulated buses, like the My City buses, you can only get them from a certain point. However, in the informal settlements, you can't expect people to walk for 3 kilometers to get to the bus. So once they're in a taxi, in a minibus taxi, they are going to stay in the minibus taxi. They're not going to catch it to get to the bus and then pay another fare. So the minibuses have created ways in which to make this work in an informal settlement. So you can't, for regulation purposes, you can't. It's very difficult to have a smooth regulated system in an unregulated environment.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that there's multiple ways in which to fix that, but ultimately it just takes a conversation between and working together, instead of the government going one way and the taxi owners and associations going the other way.
Yeah.
A lot of this could just come down to communication.
Had you ever been in a taxi before this?
Yeah, once or twice, but just at the back. And yeah, I'd never sat in the front of a taxi. And to be honest, it made a great piece of content. And I had absolutely no idea that that's what happens when you sit in the front. And people started tapping me on the shoulder and just handing me 10 notes. And I was like, what's going on?
The country's best mathematicians are in the front seat of a taxi, right? I mean, that's literally what you have there.
I know. Like Simon Kelo, when he was driving the taxi, he knew exactly how many people are coming in and out the taxi and how much money after a long trip, after say 50 people have gotten in and out the taxi. But I'd miscalculated the whole thing, and we actually ended up making a bit more profit because I'd made a mistake. I don't know. I still have absolutely no. Maybe I should. That should be my job, and I'll make a lot of money.
Okay, so you have a part 2 that you said is coming up. Not to take away from from it, and you don't want to give away too much, sure. But let us know what do you hope you can relay in messaging in this version and in the next one?
So the next one is going to be a lot more conclusive, and I'm going to try and speak to even like higher ranking officials and be able to get a more rounded picture from South Africa. And again, in no way is this to try and uncover certain stuff that's not to corruption and that sort of thing. It's just to be able to hear from both sides, as South Africa as a whole, and not just Cape Town. So we've already started filming, and I think that the process ultimately comes down to the same thing, and it's just a miscommunication. And I think it's like the people, and from the feedback that I've gotten on the film so far, which has been like really incredible, based upon it's not a video that's reached millions of people yet, but it might do with the South African audience. And people have just expressed that, you know, the psychology behind growing up and believing that taxi drivers are bad, and to have that dissonance to not wanting to understand in another way, or even go down the route of thinking as taxi drivers as just fathers trying to look out for their families. Small things like that, on like adding this personification to what's just known as like the iconology of a taxi. When you see it, you go like, ah, you know, that's bad, that's scary. And
Yeah.
just want to meet the people inside the taxis and speak to them, as well as the taxi owners. And yeah, I really believe that the way in which certain people have been painted is not fair. And like I said, of course there is mobsters and that sort of thing, and I'm not focused on that. These films aren't about the criminals. These films are about how to do this in a safe way.
Yeah.
And criminals will always find a way through anything, even if it's the government creates the fixed laws in any industry. Criminals will find a way, they'll find a loophole, and that's for criminals, that's for the police to sort out. But when it comes to taxis and regulations and the people that want to do the job properly, yeah, I believe that there's better ways to do it.
Dan, appreciate it. A significant story, a big part of South Africa's economy and our livelihoods as well, then as a country, bringing light and shedding light to it as well. The struggles on both ends, which certainly do exist then. Thank you so much for your time as well this morning.